Hi, I'm Lisa Singer. I am the event editorial manager at MediaPost, and this is our series Insider Summit BTS, where I get to pull back the curtain on some of the most influential women marketers today. And with me, I'm speaking with Meg Ceryanec, and she is the co-founder of Outlines, which they make environmentally friendly consumer goods. Hey, Meg.
Hi, Lisa. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm very good. Very excited to be here.
Yeah, I'm glad to have you here. And, just we've been having a little technical
We
difficulties on
have,
both ends, so
we
we're
have,
hoping we get through this.
we
But
have. We can do it.
now we're good friends. We know each other now, so
We do.
be even. Well, anyway, I have to say, I mean, all right, you are co-founder of Outlines, and you guys started Outlines, I think about a month before the pandemic hit, or at least in that range, very shortly before. I'm sure, you had a really good business plan together and, your
Mhm.
playbook ready. I can't imagine that that was a contingency for that. I mean, what was your initial reaction? And personally, not I know as a brand or as a company you had to react a certain way, but for you, what were you feeling?
Yeah, we had begun work on well, it wasn't called Outlines back then. It was called something else. It was called Drip, but we had begun working about 6 to 8 months before the pandemic, kind of as a side project. But we had begun working on it full time a few months before the pandemic. So we kind of jumped headfirst into it. And it's actually a kind of funny story. We had obviously at that point gone out to raise money because we had decided, okay, we think we're really onto something here. We've spoken to lots of potential customers who agree. We've spoken to some investors who seem to agree. So we're like, okay, we're doing this. We're gonna go raise money. We're gonna make this thing a reality. And we actually were getting some traction with investors kind of in late January, early February. And then in about mid-February, we landed this incredible deal with an absolute dream investor that was literally going to be a game changer for us. I mean, almost better than we could have ever imagined. And it was going to set the business on a completely different trajectory. And so we were so excited. And obviously at this point, we'd been, COVID was definitely becoming a thing. People were getting scared, but we weren't in full, lockdown yet. So we were, going along, sharing term sheets between the two lawyers. We actually, that night we found out, we actually went out to a bar and bought a cheap bottle of champagne and celebrated because we were so sure that like we had finally done it. And then in mid-March, New York, of course, locked down. And I think in general, everyone just got scared. There was so much unknown in every aspect of our lives, but I think for investors, obviously financially. And so they ended up pulling out. And so personally, COVID aside, it was really, 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 really hard. And we kind of just felt like we were all the way back at square one.
Wow.
And then on top of that, we obviously now were in the middle of a global pandemic. So there was everything that went along with that and all of the emotion and all of the fear around that. So on one hand, in a weird way, that kind of helped put what had happened with our company in perspective a little bit because there were worse things. It might have felt a lot worse if we weren't in lockdown. But yeah, it definitely was kind of a unique, rocky start that we didn't necessarily expect to happen.
Yeah, no, I mean, I can't imagine. I mean, obviously, we do events, so it was,
Yeah,
you
you know,
get it. And we had an event. We were like literally, we were hour by hour. Are we still having this event that's coming up?
yeah,
And it was just trying to figure it out. So,
yep,
it,
absolutely.
you basically you can kind of be worried work wise, but then as you said, you do put things in perspective. In the
Yeah,
sense that this past year and a half,
yeah,
once I sort of settled into it, then it was sort of like, okay, I'm working, my family's healthy, and
yeah,
like so you sort of can sort of have that solidarity with people. And
absolutely.
did that help you? I mean, how did you then moving into COVID and or the pandemic, which went on for much longer than I think any of us expected initially?
Yeah.
How did you brace yourself that way and to continue moving forward?
Yeah, I think when New York first locked down, there was just this little bit of like, we just need to step back. Like that, it almost didn't even seem right to kind of worry or talk about. There was just like, is everyone healthy? Is everyone safe? You know, my husband and I escaped to Iowa where my parents live and locked down with them for 3 months, which was also an interesting experience. Luke, my co-founder, stayed in New York. And so, you know, we were in touch on a daily basis. But a lot of times the conversation wasn't around the business. It was, you know, how are you guys doing? Are you okay? What's New York like? You know, are you getting outside? Is everyone healthy? So yeah, there was definitely a little bit of a break where we were thinking about it, but there were bigger things to worry about. There also, obviously, from you know, an investment standpoint, investors, you know, we had no idea what was going on. I think no one was investing for a period because they had no idea what was going on. So there was kind of a natural moment where we couldn't really go out and pitch and try to raise money. But the kind of interesting thing was that actually ended up in the end being a bit of a good thing. It made us kind of slow down and really understand, you know, what we were trying to do. It gave us more of a chance to speak to people about what we were doing, what we were thinking about, and just give it kind of a lot more time and space to breathe. And ultimately, we ended up coming out of it with actually a much, much bigger business opportunity and idea. And I think something that we're even more excited about now than we were when we landed that amazing deal pre-COVID.
Well, I
So
love,
yeah,
I'm sorry to interrupt, but I love that because that is one of my questions always. I love to ask the silver lining, you know,
yeah,
and it's sort of, I've always been that person to sort of want to find that silver
yeah,
lining, but especially from
absolutely.
COVID, it's been something that I'm hearing from a lot of different marketers. And I love that you have that. I mean, I'm assuming that would be your answer if I asked you. So, and,
Yeah.
and
Oh,
tell
definitely.
people a little bit more about what you guys are, because you said now you're at a bigger plan. So tell people a little bit so they have a better understanding of what Outlines is.
Yeah. So essentially we're hitting reset on home essentials. So all of the products that we all use daily or weekly that play really important roles of keeping our homes clean and organized. Everything from sponges and dish scrubbers to toilet brushes and loofahs and shower liners, you know, real workhorses of products, but also products that, you know, haven't had much innovation in a very long time and aren't necessarily, you know, the most user-friendly or aesthetically pleasing. But I think what's, you know, what people are really paying attention to nowadays as well is the materials they're made of and if they can recycle them. Because when you think about it, because of what you're using these products for, they have to be replaced eventually, right? They're getting full of bacteria and scum and mold. And so in order to keep our homes clean, we have to replace them, we have to get rid of them. But then of course, because of the materials they're made of, they cannot be recycled. So they're also horrible for the environment, and really exacerbating the plastic waste problem. So we just, from a category standpoint, a product standpoint, we're really excited about, you know, bringing design and innovation to this category, both in how you use them, how they look, what they're made of, but then also how they're replaced. And so when we initially went out to raise money, it was very much focused on the category and these products specifically. But then when we kind of stepped back, and obviously the interesting thing about COVID is there were also a lot of trends that had kind of been already going on, but accelerated over COVID.
Yeah.
The obvious one is people moving to buying things online, right? And it wasn't kind of just the stuff that they had been buying online, it was things that they didn't usually buy online, such as groceries or kind of basics and essentials. So that really kind of opened our eyes to, okay, if people are actually now thinking more about buying these products online, is there a bigger opportunity here to sell direct to consumer or kind of change how these products are distributed? And then the other thing we obviously thought a lot about during COVID was, I think people became hyper aware again of germs and mold and bacteria in their home. And also that then extended into the toxins in some of their products in their homes. And so I think there's also been sort of an awakening around that. And so that then got us thinking about, okay, is there actually also an opportunity to help people understand how the factors in their home or the ventilation in their bathroom affects the growth of these germs and bacteria? And could we help them understand that, educate them on that, and then actually help them make sure that they don't have that in their home? So what came out of that was not just, hitting reset on this category of products, but actually upending the entire business model. And so that's the bigger opportunity, I think, that I was referring to earlier. And it's what we're calling responsible replenishment. So could we create an entirely new way of doing things that starts with, all the way with who the partners we're working with, obviously the materials that we're using in these products, how often we're sending them to you, making sure that it's personalized to you and we're not sending you more than you need, but we're sending you enough such that you don't have mold growing in your home. And then also when we do send them to you, making sure that there's a way that they never make their way to landfill or the ocean, and that we guarantee they're recycled. So all the way from manufacturing to end of life, can we truly rethink that entire model? And I think what's really exciting about responsible replenishment is, while home essentials are a great place to start because there's a lot of room for improvement in this category, and they're incredibly wasteful, responsible replenishment could actually be applied to, almost any product in your home when you really think about it. So in our lives, things will have to be replaced, things will have to be replenished, but can we introduce a new model and do it in a much more responsible way?
Wow. So, and that's, obviously, even today, especially, I think people are expecting more from brands, not only in terms of their values. And, we saw so many people coming together and wanting brands to step up for, Black Lives Matters or more inclusivity, or just, anything where they wanted to share. They wanted to buy from a brand that they share the same values. And obviously sustainability, the environment, that all has been key. I think more so. It's been always, all of these things hopefully have always been important, but in general, we've definitely been shining a light on it more.
100%. Yeah.
So I think, you guys stepping up that way, and talk about that a little bit, just as a brand, you're a newer brand. And so there are also certain things to think of in terms of, you are a new brand, you're just starting out. You want to reach everyone. You don't want to necessarily alienate different audiences. At the same point, you have certain values you want to portray. Obviously, environmentally, that's a given. But do you feel still, in the person in your position with a brand, you still need to sort of step up and be that spotlight for other people in need, other communities in need, and sort of lend your voice?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think, we don't want to pretend that we're going to change the world. But we also want to make sure that we're continuously improving and doing better. And that it's not just something we're saying, but it's actually values we hold within as well, from a culture and a team standpoint. Sustainability as a word, sometimes I just feel like it's so overused, and it's almost used to the point where it's like you don't even know what it means exactly in each scenario. And as you said, like in today's world, especially with a product business, it's almost a given. They have to be doing things more sustainably. It's like table stakes at this point. So for us, rather than kind of saying, oh, we're the sustainable version of this, we're the sustainable business, we're really focusing on the various, as I said before, with responsible replenishment, and how that affects the various parts of the business in each way. Are the materials that we're using ethically sourced? Like, where are they coming from? Are they 100% non-toxic? Are they, are we creating products that are as recyclable as possible? Are we using materials that eventually will be able to actually break down and use in new outlines products? We are actually redesigning these products such that you actually only need to replace the part that gets dirty. You don't need to throw the entire thing away, further reducing what gets replaced. And then, as I said before, we are removing all the friction around recycling. So we're offering guaranteed recycling to customers at no cost to them. And, where there are a lot of great recycling programs, there's usually some point of friction, whether it's you have to source the envelope or the postage or collect 5 before you can send them back. We want to remove all of those barriers, just to make it almost like an afterthought that all of your products will come back to us and we guarantee they're recycled. They'll never go to landfill. So, we don't actually use the word sustainable that much because we would rather talk about the very specific things that we're doing across the entire business, and then also be very, very honest about continuously improving, because there will always and forever be room for improvement. And we need to be very honest and transparent about that. I think a lot of the brands that I've always respected the most are very honest and transparent about what they're doing, and then also how far they have to go, and not pretending that they're doing everything right. And that's kind of going back to what you were talking about with the values, and being very honest with that. And, we actually, even though we're only a team of 4, because values are so important, not just externally, but internally now, we actually every single quarter, when we started Outlines as a team, we came up with a list of values, and we went through this rigorous process to decide what were our most important values. And each quarter, we actually sit down, we pulled up the list, and we each write on Post-its 4, 5, 6 examples of where we have exhibited values, and we put them up on a wall. And if there's a value up there where no one has an example, we then talk about whether that should still be a value. Because if we're not exhibiting, if we don't have examples, is it really as important to us? And if it is, then let's work on that.
Mm-hmm.
So we really are trying to internally as well, really, really stay true to our values, and it's not just lip service. If it's no longer a value, let's not pretend that it is. Let's decide what is most important to us. It's
no, I'm sorry, but that obviously, I think what a lot of women, I speak with a lot of people, marketers, again, it has to start inside. It has to start internally within the company. It can't just be lip service, and it has to be, true to the brand. It has to be authentic, which sounds exactly like what you guys are doing.
And I think customers know when it's not. So especially today. So 100%. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I want to back up a little bit in terms of your career. When you first started out, you were in insurance underwriting, and then you went and got your MBA, and then you were working for a moldable glue company, which is definitely, I would like to hear more of. No, but anyway, and now here you are. And so obviously it's evolved. And talk about that. When you first graduated, what was your goal, and what were you seeing in your career path, and how did it evolve? How did it come to where you are today?
Yeah, I think it goes all the way back to kind of where I grew up and how I grew up. I'm from Iowa, very Midwestern girl at heart, and I like to think that I carry a lot of the Midwestern values with me even today, even though I haven't lived in Iowa for a long time. But I think that just instilled in me a very deep sense of empathy, and really the importance of really trying to understand other people and be kind to people and respect other people. And so I actually ended up going to college, but I studied English literature, but I also studied human and organizational development, because that was just something that was really important to me and that I wanted to understand more about. And so when I graduated, it doesn't seem like the obvious career path, underwriting, but actually insurance, and especially insurance in London, which is where I actually started out my career, is at Lloyd's of London. It is, of course, there are some, there is some number crunching, there is some analysis, but I would say 90% of the business is relationships, whether that's relationships as an underwriter with the brokers or with the end client themselves. And I loved that about it. I loved really like digging in and understanding, with the clients, like the motivations behind what they were telling you, or reading between the lines, or truly just like trying to understand how best serve each client. And then with the brokers, they had different motivations, like where are they coming from? And it was something that I I really, really enjoyed the relationship side of the business, and I felt like I was quite good at it. And I wanted to do more of it. The thing I didn't love was working for a huge, huge corporation and sort of feeling like a little cog in that kind of massive wheel. And so that's why I decided to go back to business school. I kind of wanted to pivot out of that, and I wanted to do something where I felt closer to the ground, and like not on a day-to-day basis I was making a difference, but over time I could feel like I was making little bits of difference here and there. And the MBA gave me a chance to, obviously gave me some great business education, which I needed and I felt was important, but also I got to intern at a lot of startups for the first time and really get like a taste of different types of companies, different types of founders, different types of businesses.
Is that what put that in your blood, I guess, in terms of the entrepreneurial spirit? Is that where that came from?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I knew I wanted, leaving insurance, I knew I wanted to do something a little more entrepreneurial. I wasn't sure if that meant like an early stage startup or what that meant exactly. So I wanted to kind of join a few companies at different levels, at different stages, and really get a feel for what interested me most. And so that was really great. Business school, it gave you a little bit of space to explore, which was nice. And I'm very thankful for that experience. It also made it slightly easier to pivot. So after I graduated, I ended up joining the moldable glue business based in London. And it sounds quite boring, but it was actually a very, very exciting company to work for. The founder she's an incredible founder, very creative, and she had actually invented and patented this entirely new substance. And we called it Sugru. And it would be like if Play-Doh and super glue had a baby. And essentially
it looks pretty cool. I was looking at it.
So the whole reason behind it was she wanted to create something that made it as easy as possible to fix anything. She had become very disillusioned with how quickly people throw things out when they break. And so she created the substance to essentially do that. So it also had this cool mission behind it. And even though, again, it was a glue, she had built this incredible, really cool brand around it. And started D2C before D2C was kind of a thing, and just grew it into this incredible community. And I was lucky enough to join her at this really interesting stage where, again, they had this really, passionate, tight community around it who loved telling people about it, but they kind of were in that teenage phase where, okay, now they needed to turn this into like a real business with like process and fundamentals and all of the stuff you need to do to create a real business. So I came in at that stage, and it was just an incredible learning experience because I got to work right alongside her, right alongside our COO, and wear numerous different hats and just literally learn right alongside them, and the highs and the lows. And the lows were just as important as the highs for what I'm doing now. So all of that is to say, I think my interest in people and understanding people and their motivations and that kind of end customer is what ultimately led me to really loving working for a startup. Because if you think about it, a startup is almost as close to that customer as you can get in the initial stages. So yeah.
Yeah, no, and and having this woman who started the company, the moldable glue, which I do agree. I saw one of the photos. It was fixing the cord, on the plug.
Oh yeah, the Apple. Yeah,
that is so awesome. I mean, I've had that so many times. I'm like taping it and using whatever.
Oh yeah,
and
they're not cheap.
Yeah, I went first to go get a new one. I was told how much. I'm like, all right, some black tape, and I just like, but that would be so much better. But also working for, I mean, obviously she is an independent, strong woman starting her own company with her own vision. I mean, that must have been great to have someone like that to kind of mentor you. I mean, even though you were working, to help her business, I'm sure she was able to be a part of sort of a model for you as well.
100%. And what was very interesting was in insurance, it is still quite traditionally a male dominated industry. I will say I was on my team. There were very few female underwriters. I was definitely the youngest on my team. Everyone else was male, and that's what I experienced in London as well. So she was actually my first kind of female boss I ever had. And it was so interesting for me because again, in insurance, it was full of males and quite high powered, and everyone was very extroverted and kind of gregarious. And she was the first boss I had that was a female, but she was also she was just a very different leader. She was very thoughtful. I wouldn't call her introverted, but very thoughtful. She very much did not need to be the loudest voice in the room. In fact, in some meetings, she would barely even speak. She would just kind of take it in. And then maybe a day or two later, she would say something that you knew she'd been listening, and she'd kind of taken it all in and then come out with this incredible insight or idea. She was not afraid to surround herself with, people that were smarter than her or even louder than her. And she just let that kind of like vulnerability show. Vulnerability in the sense that I know I don't know everything, but that's okay. I still bring my own value. But I need others around me that can help me, and that's okay. That's how, it should be. And so that was the first time I kind of experienced that. And I imagine that is going to affect the type of leader, I am and that I want to be into the future. Because I think that what that does is it really also invites diversity of thought and experience, rather than a kind of leader who's, at the very top of the ladder and is the kind of know-all, I make final decisions. It's a very different way of working and leading. And I think it's definitely the type of leader I would aspire more to be.
Yeah, and I think just seeing the different personalities, whether men or women, but even just the different women I speak with, some are that gregarious and they're going to be in the room, and then others, as you said, are more, they sit back, listen, take it in. They're not necessarily even going to voice something. And I've met many, all different kinds, and it's great that now everyone's sort of accepting that you can be who you are naturally, as opposed to I know I talk with women who maybe years ago had to be more like a guy, or sort of feel that way, or on the other, maybe don't be like a guy, because then you're considered the B word, so whatever it may be. So I love seeing that there's all these different personalities, and that people are just embracing who they are and seeing the value in that. But,
100%. And in fact, I think the tone is almost changing to some of the best leaders are actually the vulnerable leaders, or the leaders who surround themselves with people smarter than I think there's a lot of conversation around that maybe being the more impactful type of leadership long term. But I also think it's good to have a mix, and it's good to have experienced all different types of leaders, because it just helps inform the type of leader I want to be or hope to be.
Yeah, no, I think that sounds great. Well, I'm going to change it up a little bit now in terms of, is there a time that if you could pick any other time era to live, when would that be and why?
I'm going to say, you mean like decades?
Yes.
Kind of? Okay.
When I say era, I'm like, I hear my Boston accent. I try to avoid words like that, but I gotta say it.
I would say the 70s. I would imagine that was a pretty exciting time I think, if I were like of working age, kind of, 20 or older, that's kind of obviously what I'm thinking. I just think that was, there was so much happening. Society was just really progressing, especially from a female standpoint. I would have loved, it still is, of course, but that would have been a really, really exciting time. I think I would have loved to have a little bit more time without kind of cell phones and all the technology we have now. And also I love disco. I was a show choir nerd.
You need
Sorry.
the and the glitter.
I was just gonna say I was a show choir nerd for years, and so you give me sequins and like I'm happy. So I
Awesome.
would have loved the
I love the
70s.
bell bottom look. I think that's,
Oh,
I mean, I know it comes
yeah.
and
That's
goes.
coming back. Yeah.
No, but it's like you never know. I always just save mine. Like it's like go so many times you think it's still in. Like no, Lisa, get rid of that. You know, it's like
But
oh,
it'll come back. It'll come
I have
back.
big feet, so I like it. It covers my feet.
It's a very
So
flattering shape. Yeah.
yeah, I think so. Now I noticed on one of your interests for LinkedIn, you talked mentioned a writer, Gretchen Rubin, and she writes best-selling. She's a best-selling writer, and she writes about habits and happiness. So I want to ask you, what is a habit of yours that brings you happiness?
This is a very, very good question. Um, I don't know if it's a habit. It's not a habit, but I will say something that I can do kind of on my own time if I'm in a funk and it brings me a lot of happiness. And I don't admit this to many people, but I'm going to say to you, I love to dance. Um, and I have actually, I kind of got back into it during the pandemic. Actually, obviously, we were all like working, trying to figure out how we work out from home or exercise from home or whatever it was, and I wasn't loving it. But the one thing that I started doing again, because I realized there's so many great apps for it, is like at-home dance classes. And the sillier, the better. And the ones that I loved were the Peloton classes. There's just some great instructors, and it just feels great to move in kind of ways that you wouldn't otherwise. Like we never really, we don't dance very often, but I think also just like completely letting ego go and just being ridiculous and silly. One, I think it's great for endorphins. You laugh a little bit, but two, it's just like it's also just you leave your ego at the door. There's, it just kind of like centers you again. It reminds you that everything, things don't need to be so serious, and just to kind of let go a little bit. So I wouldn't necessarily call it a habit, but if I am really in a funk, I will turn those classes on, and I guarantee that 30 minutes later, I will feel 100 times better.
Put on some Earth, Wind, and Fire.
Yeah.
Do a little
Again. Yeah, exactly. Get some sequence.
that. No, that dance.
Call it a day. Yeah.
Well, so do you want to dance it out here? We can say goodbye and you
Oh my
can start
God.
dancing first.
Like this. I didn't think this is how this interview would end, but
On that note, as we
my show choir teacher is gonna be so happy.
next time you need to wear the glitter and we'll get it all going here. We'll play some music. We'll be all set. Well,
Wow.
thank you so much, Meg. I really enjoyed this. I really appreciate you taking the time.
Thank you so much.
I'm glad.
All right.
Yeah, no, and I want to thank you guys for watching. And again, we do this each week. So if you have anyone you'd like to suggest that a woman marketer who you are just really impressed with, want to hear more from, let me know and I will try to get her. So thank you.